Emily's arm was seized by a man in a shadowy uniform, his voice sharp and unyielding. "You're trespassing. You have to come with me." Heart pounding, she pulled out a badge that stopped him cold. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The moment froze in time, the hot sun dipping low behind the pine trees, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement where Emily stood, poised, but unyielding. Roy Matthews, towering and thick-shouldered, his uniform rumpled and patched with authority he did not deserve, blinked in disbelief at the calm defiance radiating from a girl barely out of high school. His grip tightened briefly on her arm before loosening, as if confused whether to press harder or retreat. Every inch of him screamed a man used to command, but unaccustomed to being challenged. Around them, the community pool area remained deserted, the late afternoon lull swallowing any potential witnesses. Yet this was not just about a simple confrontation. It was a battle over legitimacy, over who had the power to dictate order in a neighborhood that prided itself on civility. Roy's presence, cloaked in a faux authoritarian sheen, was a threat to that fragile balance. His authority was a facade, constructed from the HOA's whispered agreements and his own inflated sense of importance. The badge Emily revealed, a cold, shining symbol of genuine power, shattered that illusion instantly. Emily's voice was steady, a quiet thunder. "I'm not being detained. You don't have that right." Her words were carefully chosen, legal lines drilled into her from FBI briefings, practiced but never hollow. Roy's eyes darted toward the badge, then back to her face, trying to read the layers beneath. He saw neither fear nor confusion, but a clear, resolute defiance that his unofficial role could never command. Behind this confrontation lay years of simmering tension. Roy had long been a controversial figure, hired quietly by the HOA board to patrol the streets, to keep the peace, as they put it. But peace enforced by intimidation is fragile at best, brittle and explosive at worst. Roy's methods, abrupt stops, unsolicited interrogations, threats thinly veiled beneath forced smiles, had set the neighborhood on edge. Parents whispered complaints, but the HOA's opaque governance shielded him. He was a shadow cop without badges or warrants, wielding control through bluster and assumed power. I remember the first time I met Roy, a large man with a booming voice, offering unsolicited advice about my lawn and the angle of my porch lights. His eyes lingered a little too long, his tone just sharp enough to unsettle. I chalked it up to overzealousness, the sort of petty bureaucracy headache any HOA board could spawn. But with time, Roy's presence morphed into a lurking menace, his patrols less about safety and more about surveillance, his citations often arbitrary punishments for trivial or non-existent infractions. That day, watching him try to cuff my daughter was the breaking point. It was not just the illegality, it was the symbolism. Roy wasn't protecting us. He was policing us in a way that made this community feel less like a home and more like a cage. Emily, young and fierce, refusing to be shackled by his overreach, embodied the resistance that many felt but lacked the courage to voice. Roy's desperation showed in the tremble of his hands as he hesitated, then stepped back, his gaze flickering between defiance and defeat. The badge, that simple piece of metal and plastic, had unraveled everything he tried to build. He was a man out of place, wielding a power no one had granted, facing a girl trained in law enforcement principles far beyond his understanding. And in that charged silence, the true fracture beneath our neighborhood's polished surface revealed itself. A struggle not only for control of the streets, but for the soul of the community. Who gets to decide what order means? Who is entrusted to enforce it? The HOA board's tacit endorsement of Roy's overreach hinted at a governance more concerned with appearances and unchecked authority than with fairness or respect for its residents. Emily's steady breath, her unflinching stance, became a quiet testament to standing against injustice, to fighting not with fists, but with knowledge and integrity. Her refusal to submit to a false authority was not just about one encounter. It was a declaration that this community could not be policed by fear or unchecked power. It was a warning that the balance of trust, once broken, demands reckoning. As I watched from the shadows, fists clenched, heart pounding, I understood the gravity of what had almost happened. This wasn't simply an incident. It was a mirror held up to our neighborhood's vulnerabilities, to the cracks that lay beneath manicured lawns and HOA newsletters. And it was clear, if we did not confront this now, if we allowed this imposter and the system enabling him to continue unchecked, our community's peace would unravel into something far darker and more dangerous than any late afternoon jog past the pool. The moment Roy's gaze locked on Emily's badge, something flickered, an instant of hesitation, before his mask of authority hardened into something darker, more desperate. His voice, once clipped and forceful, now carried an edge of menace that made the hairs on my neck rise. "You need to leave this property, now, or there will be consequences," he spat, as if the threat alone could erase the badge's undeniable legitimacy. It was no longer about HOA regulations or neighborhood guidelines. Roy's grip on reality twisted into a dangerous power trip, an unmoored assertion of control designed to intimidate rather than protect. I didn't hesitate. My heart hammered in my chest, a fierce mixture of rage and protective instinct driving my steps as I stormed toward them. The afternoon air felt thick with tension, each word between them a spark ready to ignite a fire. How could a man so reckless, so blinded by his own delusions of authority, put my daughter in harm's way? Emily's steady composure had cracked, her usual calm replaced by visible distress. Watching her struggle to process the indignity and danger inflicted by this fraud was like a punch to the gut. No parent should ever witness their child so threatened in a place meant to be safe. The shock lingered long after Roy finally retreated, but it was quickly replaced by a burning urgency. Our sanctuary had been compromised, and the veneer of neighborhood tranquility shattered. This was a man empowered not by law or duty, but by the silent consent of an HOA board, too eager to sweep problems under the rug. They had allowed Roy to operate unchecked, without proper oversight or accountability, creating a loophole for abuse that left residents vulnerable. The weight of that negligence pressed on us, heavier than any threat Roy could make. Yet despair was not an option. In that charged silence, the decision crystallized. We would not allow this injustice to stand unchallenged. The fight for justice began immediately. We documented everything: photos of the uniform that bore no official insignia, recorded witness accounts from neighbors who had grown wary of Roy's patrols, detailed notes capturing every word of the confrontation. The pieces of evidence formed a damning narrative, one we built meticulously to expose the dangerous charade Roy and the HOA perpetuated. Emily's FBI contacts became an unexpected but vital resource. Their guidance was precise, outlining the legal framework and the steps necessary to hold both Roy and the HOA accountable. The cold, bureaucratic world of law enforcement collided with our personal fight, transforming fear into actionable strategy. We learned how to navigate the complexities of civil authority versus private enforcement, how to press for transparency and demand oversight where it was glaringly absent. Our struggle quickly resonated beyond our family. The community, long simmering with quiet resentment and frustration, began to stir. Conversations that once revolved around lawn care and block parties shifted toward questions of safety, fairness, and accountability. Neighbors, emboldened by our stand, shared their own stories of Roy's intimidation and abuse. The silence that had protected this imposter fractured, replaced by a chorus demanding change. Emails flooded the HOA board, town hall meetings filled with concerned residents seeking answers, and a growing coalition formed, united by the conviction that no one, especially a teenager, should be subjected to such reckless aggression. The momentum built rapidly, fueled by outrage and a collective yearning for restoration. It was clear. The community no longer accepted the status quo. Within the whirlwind of this upheaval, Emily emerged not just as a victim, but as a symbol of resistance. Her courage inspired others to speak out, her calm determination a beacon cutting through the fear. The emotional turmoil we endured transformed into a fierce resolve, an insistence that justice would prevail, that our neighborhood would reclaim the peace it once promised. In those days following the incident, I watched Emily wrestle with the weight of what had happened, but also with the knowledge that standing firm was more important than retreating. Our fight was no longer just personal. It was a fight for every resident's dignity and safety. And though the path ahead promised conflict and resistance, the fire ignited by that badge and that moment of defiance was now burning too bright to be extinguished. We were ready. The reckoning had begun. The moment the local police officially stepped in to investigate Roy Matthews marked a turning point not only for our family, but for the entire neighborhood. Their findings were swift and unambiguous. Roy had no legal authority to enforce any laws or detain residents. He was a clear case of impersonation, wielding a uniform and badge that meant nothing in the eyes of the law. This revelation sent ripples of shock and relief through the community, exposing a dangerous breach of trust that had festered under the HOA's negligent oversight. The HOA board, confronted with undeniable evidence and mounting public pressure, could no longer maintain the facade of control. The contract with Roy was abruptly revoked, and what had once been whispered complaints and uneasy glances turned into an outpouring of demand for accountability. For years, the board had operated behind closed doors, shielding questionable decisions and ignoring the mounting concerns of residents. Now the spotlight forced them into transparency, a bitter pill but a necessary one. They pledged sweeping reforms, stricter hiring protocols, formal vetting processes, and greater openness in their dealings. These promises weren't empty words. They were the foundation for rebuilding a fractured trust. Emily's bravery became the defining emblem of this community's rebirth. Her calm defiance in the face of intimidation, brandishing her FBI badge not as a threat, but as a symbol of truth and authority, resonated far beyond our family. In neighborhood meetings, residents spoke of her as an inspiration, the teenager who refused to be silenced, who refused to be bullied by a man abusing a false title. Her story galvanized others to speak up, to refuse complacency, and to demand protection not just in words, but through action. That day by the community pool, when Emily stood firm against Roy's unlawful arrest attempt, transformed from a frightening encounter into a powerful narrative of resistance. It exposed the vulnerabilities of a system that allowed a man like Roy to thrive and illustrated the profound impact one person's courage can have on exposing and dismantling abuse. The badge Emily held was more than a credential. It was a beacon illuminating the path toward justice. As the HOA implemented reforms, the neighborhood began to heal. Meetings became forums for collaboration rather than confrontation. Neighbors who had once been strangers found common ground, bound by shared experience and the renewed promise of safety. The fear that had lingered dissipated, replaced by a cautious optimism that was palpable in every conversation and community event. But the transformation was deeper than policy changes or revoked contracts. It was a shift in consciousness, a collective awakening to the necessity of vigilance and the power of standing up to injustice. We learned that authority without accountability is a dangerous thing, and that silence in the face of abuse only emboldens those who seek to exploit it. The community's unity, forged in the crucible of this struggle, was now our strongest defense against any future threats. For me, watching Emily navigate the emotional aftermath was both heartbreaking and inspiring. She carried the weight of that confrontation with quiet dignity, channeling the pain into a resolve that strengthened not only herself, but everyone around her. The experience deepened her commitment to justice and reaffirmed the values we had always tried to instill: courage, integrity, and the refusal to back down when faced with wrongdoing. Our family emerged from this ordeal fundamentally changed. The initial shock and anger had given way to a profound sense of empowerment. We understood that justice is not a passive state, but an ongoing battle, one that requires the willingness to speak out, to confront falsehoods, and to hold institutions accountable. The fight wasn't just about one man or one incident. It was about preserving the very fabric of a community built on trust and respect. Looking back, the ordeal revealed the true strength of our neighborhood. It taught us that even when faced with deception and abuse, the combined voices of the vigilant and the brave could reclaim safety and dignity. Emily's stand against Roy Matthews was more than a personal victory. It was a catalyst for change that restored faith and forged a new beginning. In this rebirth, justice was not merely restored, it was transformed into something enduring. The community, once fractured and vulnerable, became a living testament to the power of courage and unity. No false authority, no shadow of intimidation could silence the truth or undermine the collective will of a people determined to protect what they hold dear. And so, with renewed purpose and unshakable resolve, we stepped forward, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold, together.